And we're back like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your chilly, somewhat snowy Saturday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, some of you have not seen this picture, which has been in my office here from the beginning of this podcast. But you haven't actually seen it because it's kind of off to the side usually. But I wanted to put it front and center today, in part to pay tribute to my friend Kenny, who passed, unfortunately, not long after this picture was taken. He was the one who invited me onto his podcast, and we clicked, and I became the co-host. And he really serves as continued motivation for me wanting to do this, entertain as many of you as I possibly can, hope to make you laugh, hope to be informative, all of that stuff that I like to think is favorable and positive and maybe enriching, fingers crossed. But it's not just that I wanted to put the picture to tell you the story of my old friend Kenny, who I knew going back 25 years. We met at Bev's gym. But the movie I want to talk about today was one of his favorite movies ever, non-comic book movie edition, because Kenny was a big fan of comic books. Wolverine, to be precise, was his favorite hero. Loved Deadpool. Boy, he would have gotten so much of a kick out of Deadpool and Wolverine. It's the kind of movie that was his geek fantasy. But as far as non-comic book movies, cult films, movies that he could watch over and over, film that I actually turned him on to is the movie that I want to talk about today. And I'm not going to put it into the guilty pleasure category because I think this is a great film. The movie is Don Coscarelli's 2002 comedy horror film, Bubba Ho-Tep. Now, Bubba Ho-Tep first came onto my radar not long before it was released in Limited. And the reason why it was on my radar is because I used to one of my stops on the internet in those days was Harry Knowles' Ain't It Cool News. Harry Knowles was a big Bruce Campbell fan. Bruce Campbell, who plays Ash in the Evil Dead movies, for those who don't know the name offhand. And Bruce Campbell was in Bubba Ho-Tep, but I don't remember getting that many specifics at that time, and I didn't see it in theaters. I feel like maybe it was playing at the Cinema Arts Center, but I actually didn't catch this film until it landed on DVD. And then when I read about it, it sounded like some joy because honestly, and I'm not supposed to admit this as a movie geek, a Gen X movie geek, I'm not into the Evil Dead movies. I didn't even like Army of Darkness, aka Evil Dead 3. I like Bruce Campbell as a personality, as somebody in the days before everything was a meme. There was that clip of him from Army of Darkness. All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. This is my boomstick. Must have listened to that a million times. But when I read the description of Bubba Ho-Tep, Elvis Presley in a Texas rest home needs to save the retirement home from an Egyptian mummy come to life. The concept is so bonkers. I said, well, this has to be fucking rip. And sure enough, the movie was even better than I expected. Because the Rotten Tomatoes score, if you go on, it's around 80%. So it's a good score for a film that is at times bawdy humor and at other times straightforward horror. Now, the filmmaker, Don Coscarelli, I was familiar with. I am a big fan of his 1979. He was very young at the time. He was in his mid-20s. He made the movie Phantasm, which it's kind of supernatural. It's set in an attempt at grounding supernatural with the real world. It's a very interesting film, and there are elements of it in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven, I believe, must have been a big fan and kind of paid tribute to Coscarelli's original Phantasm. The other Phantasm movies are really not that good. But what Don Coscarelli was able to achieve in that film on a very limited budget was impressive. It showed him as a filmmaker who knew how to make the most of not that much. And not everybody has that capacity, but he made a movie that did not seem like a lower budget, and he did it on a lower budget. So he's somebody who could stretch. And Bruce Campbell in Bubba Ho-Tep plays Elvis Presley. Literally Elvis Presley. Now, one of the twists of the story is that he is known in the film, they keep calling him Mr. Half, Mr. Half. His name is Sebastian Half, but that's not really his name. At a certain point in the past, Sebastian Half, who was an Elvis impersonator, whatever proof would be necessary for the real Elvis Presley to prove that he's really Elvis Presley, went up in a fire. Sebastian Half, the Elvis impersonator, is who died. Elvis Presley did not die. And now it's the early 2000s, and the real Elvis Presley, played spectacularly by Bruce Campbell, is in a Texas rest home. He's bored with life. He's got a growth on his pecker, as he'll tell anyone and everybody who comes into the room, I got a growth on my pecker. Just to hear Bruce Campbell, and you imagine it's really Elvis Presley saying it, gold. But he's got a bad attitude. He has a bum hip. Still dresses up like the king. Still uses the king's signature phrases. Let's TCB, baby. Oh, mama. He's still talking about Priscilla and how much he misses her. But he is kind of coming to the end. There isn't really that much to his daily life other than, as he says, getting served meals and going to the crapper. So his friend and fellow patient, played by the wonderful, late, great Ossie Davis, multiple Emmy nominee, Golden Globe nominee, Tony Award nominee. He succeeded in theater. He worked with Walter Matthau a number of years before this. They made the movie version of Herb Gardner's I'm Not Rappaport. Ossie Davis in this movie plays a character who claims to be John F. Kennedy. Now, that's not John F. Kennedy. As Bruce Campbell's Elvis Presley says to him, no offense, but President Kennedy was white. And the way that Bruce Campbell reads that line in such an earnest fashion, the fact that he's even dignifying this ridicularity with a response, but we know in the world of the film, this actually is Elvis Presley, so maybe that is John F. Kennedy. As Ossie Davis keeps pointing out, they dyed me this color. That's how clever they are. So this is another one of those movies where if you're a conspiracy nut, man, this is right in your wheelhouse. JFK didn't die in 63, and Elvis Presley did not die in 76. So as the story goes forth, and the early segments of the film, it's a showcase for just how funny Bruce Campbell could be. When he is, I feel like he's kind of winking at the audience a little bit. This is kind of a fan service. And let me also say, in 2002, the same year as Bubba Ho-Tep, Bruce Campbell, speaking of Evil Dead, he has a cameo as, I think that he's an usher in the Spider-Man, the first one with Tobey from 2002. He plays an usher. So he kind of pulling a little bit of double duty, but Sam Raimi, who directed Spider-Man, the original 3 with Tobey, he's the guy who did Evil Dead. And so he and Bruce Campbell always had that kind of symbiotic relationship where if it was possible for Sam Raimi to have a role, even a small role, even a cameo for Bruce, he would always at least ask, hey, would you like to give me a day or 2 days, or what can we do to work it into your schedule? The reason why the movie is called Bubba Ho-Tep is that an Egyptian mummy, presumably thousands of years old, a Tutankhamun level Egyptian mummy, somehow has sprung to life. And he is starting to menace and bump off some of the residents of this rest home. And the kind of broad concept of the movie, because what I've just described to you is so insane, but that's the movie. You kind of wonder, how could somebody have come up with this idea in the first place? How bent are they to even conceive of ridicularity at this level? But it's Bruce Campbell's Elvis Presley who coins the phrase Bubba Ho-Tep. We got some kind of an Egyptian mummy, a Bubba Ho-Tep. And he's running around bumping people off. The question of the film. Elvis Presley still got the uniform and, the razzle-dazzle of all of his costumes from back in the day. Everyone thinks that he's the Elvis impersonator, Sebastian Haff, but we as the audience know that's Elvis Presley. Film is very meta. It's working on a lot of levels. We know that it's Elvis Presley, but we know that it's Bruce Campbell playing Elvis Presley. But the idea is, here's Elvis. He's got nothing to live for. He's got a bum hip. He needs a walker to get around. But now there's this mystery. Can the king take care of business one final time? Well, it wouldn't be much of a movie if it didn't climax in some kind of a showdown between Elvis Presley and Bubba Ho-Tep. Bruce Campbell has a moment. He has actually a lot of moments, but he has one particular moment in this film where the Bubba Ho-Tep, mild spoiler, is there. And rather than turn and, well, he can't really run, but he starts making Bruce Lee kind of gestures. And he just looks at this pretty good special effect. It's a practical effect. This was not CGI. And in as close of an Elvis Presley cadence and canter as he can muster, he goes, "Don't make me use my stuff on you, baby." Don't make me use my stuff on you, baby. I mean, don't make me do my karate on you, because he supposedly knew, well, he knew Bruce Lee, but I think the real Elvis Presley might have actually taken a couple of lessons. Well, honestly, I would like to see a thousands-year-old Egyptian mummy and Elvis Presley get into a fight. I really would love that. This movie doesn't exactly go down that path, but it has a sense of fun, even though there are some conventional horror movie elements. There are a couple of deaths that are bad deaths. And there is a sense of, in general, people being dismissive of those who are older. And I recently on the channel talked about Clint Eastwood's Gran Torino and the idea of certain people assuming someone of a particular age or older, they've outlived their usefulness. They're kind of coming to the end of the line. But maybe it's not a question, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said in one of the Terminator movies, you can be old but not obsolete. And as much as many of the characters in this movie are dismissive, they don't really believe this is Elvis Presley because there's no proof that he is anyone other than Sebastian Haff. But they are being dismissive of his claims that there's some real weird shit going on here. Who's writing hieroglyphics on the shithouse wall, man? Another great line reading. Who's writing hieroglyphics on the shithouse wall? He either calls the bathroom the crapper or the shithouse. Just, it's all gold. Every time he says it, you can't help but laugh. But he's old. He still knows which end is up. He knows what's going on. And there aren't any authorities. Remember De Niro in Raging Bull. What are you, an authority? Everyone's an authority. You're an authority. The authorities don't give a shit because they think this guy is loco or he just wants attention. So it is up to the king to take care of business. And I won't obviously spoil the ending, but the movie continues to make us laugh and make us smile even when some dastardly things are taking place. Now, I should also point out that there is a vegan chef, Chef Chloe, who has a couple of restaurants in the city. She is a big name. And I saw her on TV a couple of times on the Today Show. Pretty successful. She had some issues a number of years ago. Now she's back. I just randomly happened to find out that her last name was Coscarelli. It's Don Coscarelli's daughter. So just in case any of you ever wondered about Don Coscarelli, the filmmaker behind the Phantasm series, Bubba Ho-Tep, and also he did a film about a dozen years ago called John Dies at the End, starring Paul Giamatti, among others. It's just so wacky to me that his daughter is this super successful vegan chef, and Don Coscarelli is making these and made a lot of kind of red meat horror movies, to use a phrase that used to be discussed in the 80s, the days of Stallone and Sly and Chuck Norris when they were in their salad days. ironically calling them salad days, but that kind of testosterone-soaked action movie. In the case of Coscarelli, he did make his share of gory films. Bubba Ho-Tep has some gore, but I wouldn't exactly say that the movie is gory. It's just a very entertaining ride, and for those of you who are interested in movies that are somewhat effects heavy, but don't really use green screen or CGI, where it's all practical effects, models, miniatures. I don't know about matte paintings in this movie, but certainly models, miniatures, and some form of animatronics. Film is really well done. And there has been a sequel, although I believe from what I've read it would be a prequel. It has been discussed for at least 15 years. They already have a title. Bubba Nosferatu and the She-Vampires. And I think that it would be a prequel where the Elvis Presley character would be shooting a movie in New Orleans and be beset upon by vampires. Paul Giamatti is still talking about it. He hopes that it can be made. He would play Colonel Tom Parker. It wouldn't be Bruce Campbell because he would have been aged out of any kind of a prequel situation unless they wanted to do like what they did for Pacino, De Niro, and Joe Pesci in The Irishman, which wasn't entirely successful if you want to CGI and de-age them. It's apparently still in development. Coscarelli's getting up there, but he's trying to get the film together. But if it hasn't happened in 15 years, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry to be cynical, but it's kind of like what Roger Ebert used to say about movies in general. If nothing has happened by the end of the first reel, nothing's going to happen. Bubba Ho-Tep, though, is on Tubi as we speak, and it's also on Pluto. So if you're curious to see this weird, unusual, but nevertheless amazing horror comedy, that's how you do it. You don't have to pay for it. Yeah, you could go on Amazon Prime and watch the film and pay a couple of bucks, but Tubi is a free app. You have to deal with a couple of commercials, but these days you seem to have to deal with commercials at every tier of every app. Even if you pay the maximum, they still hit you with ads every now and then. But Bubba Ho-Tep is absolutely worth your time. You don't even have to really necessarily be a fan of horror if you just want to watch a good, entertaining movie with a really crazy story. And a masterclass in film acting, a multi-leveled, multi-layered performance by Bruce Campbell, because we also get to meet this Sebastian Haff, and the way that he's able to accurately portray two different people, although for the bulk of the movie he is Elvis Presley, it's just really skillful. And I think Bruce was nominated for some kind of niche, I don't know about a Caesar Award, but some of the sort of niche horror/sci-fi kind of awards in the independent circuit. It's really, I think it's the best performance of his career. He doesn't really get to do that much acting in the Evil Dead movies. Sorry to say that I never watched the TV series that he did with Jeffrey Donovan called Burn Notice. People for years were telling me that I had to see that show. Also, in 2017, many of you know that I lived, if you're familiar with Long Island, I lived in Huntington Village, right across the street from a place that no longer exists. It closed down in 2021, called Book Review. Basically, Book Review was a Barnes & Noble, but it was a mom and pop Barnes & Noble. And they used to get dignitaries of all kinds, from heads of state, famous actors, actresses who wrote books, musicians who wrote books, actual book authors, and movie stars. And in the summer of 2017, Bruce Campbell appeared at the Book Review. And when I tell you the line was around the block, the line was around the block. There were so many people there to meet Elvis Presley, Ash from Evil Dead. He wasn't able to actually pose for pictures with anyone the way they normally like to do it. And you can even see the final guest, unfortunately, at Book Review was Diane Keaton the first week of February of 2020. She was able to actually pose for pictures with people. That was a big crowd, but she had a book to sell. And I don't know if he was selling a book at that time, because he did have a book called, it was like a Jay Leno, Leading with My Chin or something like that, because Bruce Campbell is known, he has a pretty prominent chin. But you were only able to, if you look at pictures of the event, if you were to Google Bruce Campbell book review Huntington, you'll see there's a lot of pictures of him, but they had to kind of do it on the fly. Each person only had like a minute in his company. They just, like an assembly line, like department store Santa in a Christmas Story, where they just had to keep the line moving. So I didn't even get a chance to go. There were just too many people. You would have had to start waiting on the line at like 9 a.m. to guarantee that you would get a slot, that you would get inside. Book Review was a big store, but it was not that big. So I didn't get to meet him. Unfortunate. But the love that fans had for him, and a woman who was a neighbor, she actually lived downstairs, she went to the event. And a couple of days later, we were just kind of hanging out outside the building. And I said, did you end up getting to meet him? And she says, yeah. I said, did he sign a book, or did he sign anything for you? And she said, I had some lingerie that I asked him to sign. He signed that. That made me laugh, because that's so Bruce Campbell. That is so much what we would expect from somebody who is a natural character on top of a very versatile talent. Because on Burn Notice, he has moments of humor, but there's a lot of serious shit, from what I can gather, that takes place on that show. And obviously, losing his hand in, Evil Dead, and he's gotten killed how many times? Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. But Bubba Ho-Tep is not just a guilty pleasure movie. It is a terrific horror film, and it is a very funny comedy, anchored by a fantastic Bruce Campbell performance. Bubba Ho-Tep, 2002, written and directed by Don Coscarelli, starring Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis. The newest entry in our continuing series of the best movie you've never seen. This has been episode 405 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,